All right, fantastic. Okay, so we are in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. We are dangerously close to the end. We literally have one more week in 2 Corinthians. And then, as I mentioned last week, we will move ourselves back into the Old Testament. And we're going to pick up with 1 Samuel, starting on the fourth Sunday. So if you want to go ahead and start reading in advance, get yourself up to speed and caught up and remind yourself what 1 Samuel is all about, you can go ahead and do that. All right, so we're talking about strength from weakness, 2 Corinthians 12. I have to start the way we always start. What do we remember from last week? What do we remember from last week, or chapter 11 in general, not just last week necessarily? What do we remember about last week?
We were talking about Paul and the way that would he work today? And we came to the conclusion, yes, because sometimes we have to go back to the beginning to start fresh and end with a bang, end with a great thing. And Paul's teachings have lasted a lifetime. So, yes.
Okay, so in hindsight, we think he would be successful today. Any different perspective or additional perspective?
I was looking at, I think 2 Corinthians 14, it says, and no wonder, for Satan himself transformed himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. So I was looking at that. I mean, you have just people, and then like saying churches, you may think that they are saved, but they have just the appearance of that. I'm finished.
What else?
Well, Christy, I stick with my opinion from last week. I believe that while I do believe that Paul had a successful ministry, and like you said, hindsight shows us that, I still believe that because he was more popular with his local body, even though his ministry did do a lot of things, I feel like that if we were looking at it from our lens, like today, what we consider success, I don't think that he would be considered globally successful because he was more concentrated to his local church, so to speak. I think that we look at success kind of differently globally, like a Jake's, because he reaches everywhere, versus somebody who is only successful in their local city. So I think that he'd be successful, but I think that it will be looked at differently.
How many people, if you think about that, all thank you for all your feedback. And if we think about it, and Shandon, I love your comment. I'm glad we started with yours specifically because it is easy to look at things in arrears, right? Hindsight's 2020, all the things that we all say. And now we would definitely call Paul successful because we've seen the fruit and the continuing 2000, however many years later, of all the things that he was able to do and implant based with God's help. But at that time, which gets to Deborah's point, at that time, he was very focused on, it looked local. Everything was local. He was planting individual churches. And we talked about most of those churches were house churches. That doesn't look global. That doesn't look like somebody who's going to be wildly successful. You just having Bible study at the house. Joyce Meyer, great example. Someone today. Joyce Meyer started with Wednesday night Bible studies in her living room. And as she would say, her own testimonial, I was sitting in the floor. I was 20 years old. I knew I wanted to teach women, but I had no idea how to do it. So I was literally, she said, I was sitting in my floor in short shorts, smoking a cigarette, teaching women's Bible study. And now look at Joyce Meyer. So, at that time, anybody who looked at her might have said, she's just teaching Bible study, smoking a cigarette in her living room, not envisioning the global impact that she would have, the multiple books that she would have based on her doing what she knew that God had called her to do. So good. Any other perspectives about anything else we talked about last week before we jump into this week? All right, let's dig in. Okay, so we get started again. Chapter 12. This is NIV today. I shared the message with you last week. Paul says, I must go on boasting, although there is nothing to be gained. I will go on to visions and revelations from the Lord. So we start in verse 1 with exactly where he's been for a minute. Boasting. Why was Paul boasting? Now let's talk about that real quick. So we got to ground ourselves. Why was Paul boasting?
That came before.
Feel free to help her out. Why was Paul boasting? He spent the last at least 2 chapters boasting. So why has he been doing that? Porter talked about it last week. Go ahead.
That's why I'm trying to get to his notes. He was wanting to, I want to say, stand firm on what he was teaching, if that makes sense.
Was he comparing himself to the imposters as well?
What did he call them? Depending on which Bible version you looked at, he called them a lot of names.
Achievement.
What did he call these preachers that everybody was listening to in Corinth? What were some of the names he gave them?
Was deceivers one of them?
Super apostles was one. He called them egomaniacs, if you were looking in the Message Bible. At the end of the day, he didn't have great things to say about him. So he was boasting, to Arnita's point, because he was basically saying, this is what you all listen to. This is apparently what you all like to hear. So let me just do what you're accustomed to doing and play the fool, because that's indeed what they are. Because the things that they're boasting about are things that are really foolish. They're things that really should not even matter in the grand scheme of things, but that's what you all like to hear. And in order for you to hear me, I guess I have to play along with this game. That's why he's boasting. So let's go back and make sure we read specifically chapters 11 and 12, but he's boasting a little bit before that. So he goes on to say, I know, and so he said, I will go on to visions and revelations from the Lord. Verse 2, I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know that this man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows, was caught up to paradise and heard inexpressible things that no one is permitted to tell. I will boast about a man like that, but I will not boast about myself, except about my weakness. Who is Paul talking about? Who is this man in Christ that he's talking about?
He's talking about himself.
Okay, he's talking about himself. All right.
Wait,
Yes.
I was going to say, and that's interesting. The understanding that he says, he's like talking in the third person, right? But then he says, basically, then he almost goes back and says, I'm not talking about me. So it's kind of like a mysterious kind of conversation that's going on.
Yeah. So why is I'm going to piggyback on what you said. So why is he talking about himself? in the third person.
I
Um,
meditated on
does he
that.
get-
Go
okay.
ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I-
Go ahead.
maybe not giving himself more glory and praise, above Christ.
Yep. Yep. Shandon, what were you at? Anything?
No. I was going to go there too. Because see, sometimes we have to move ourselves out of the way, in order for people to see that it's truly not us that's doing this. And when we move ourselves, we can see God more. So I was going to say the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to talk more about this vision. Yeah, we'll talk more about that vision in just a second. All right, so the vision is about Paul himself. He talks in the third person because, as he says in verse 5, I will boast about a man like that, but I will not boast about myself. So let's go ahead and talk about this vision. Well, why do you think Paul was given this vision? Why do you think he was given this vision? "14 years ago, why do you think God shared this vision with Paul?"
What could it have been to strengthen him in, just a true understanding of the glory of God and who God is. And so as he ministers, to be able to keep that understanding. And yeah, I'm just kind of thinking, just a source of strength, source of hope as to the glory and the majesty of Christ, just to keep him centered in continuing the work.
Mm-hmm.
I thought.
Okay. Anybody else? Why do you think God gave him this vision? So I'm going to pause and hold that question. Know that I'm coming back. Okay, go ahead.
Well, he took him up to let him know that about the real divine secrets in heaven, that only he could know, that he did have that experience. So I believe that kept him going too. And then, yeah. And then also he sat on that for about 14 years. And this was the right time to bring it out. Okay, I'm finished.
Yeah, but okay, so why did he hold on to it for 14 years? Why did he not talk about it for 14 years?
Were the people not ready to receive?
Okay, where we at? What else?
Because all the work that he had been doing, he just had to wait so the people could see and maybe accept that. That's all I have.
Okay, all right. So everything you're saying is absolutely right. God gives us visions. How many of you would say you've had a vision from God? God has shown you something that may or may not have happened yet, but you still had that vision. And I know there's one that I have had. Yep. Corey, I'm assuming you raise your hand, but you might have a question, but you might just be agreeing with me. So if you have a question, I'll get to you in just a second. But when I know the vision that God gave me, I got this vision probably now close to 18 years ago. It has not happened yet. I remember the vision as vividly, and I don't remember what I ate yesterday. I'm that person. So I remember it as vividly now as I remembered it when I got that vision. And part of the reason God gave him this vision is because that sustains him, which is what Jacqueline was saying, what has said before. It's what has sustained him to know the things that he saw, the things that actually he didn't see, he heard. So to have the things that God revealed to him That is what sustained him over his trials and over his ministries. And as I even, again, make this personal and think about it for myself, that vision I'm holding on to, because I'm like, well, I can't die yet because that vision hasn't happened. I can't get sick. That vision hasn't happened. And what I saw was not a sick body when that was happening. So all these little trials, tests, health scares, none of that can be true, not to my detriment, because that vision hasn't happened. And so Paul having that vision is what sustained him over those 14 years. And the only reason he's even bringing it up now is he really could. The mentality of the Corinthians was all about the boasting and the big and, you know, miracles, signs, wonders, all those things that Paul had shown them his ability to do. That's what they were all into. So he really could have taken this vision, blown it out, and they would have been like, oh my God, you are the man. That's amazing. Because think about it. We've had people in society over the years who said they've seen heaven. I died, I went to heaven, I saw X, Y, and Z. And to say that today, whether it's true or not, I can't argue whether people have or haven't. I haven't had that experience. But what's our immediate response? If we had that experience, we'd immediately probably be on social media. We'd be doing videos about it. We'd be on some talk show circuit talking about what we saw, especially if it was miraculous and different than what had been seen before. And that wasn't what Paul was doing, because that would glorify Paul. And we know that Paul's ministry, his whole ministry was always about glorifying God, glorifying Jesus. So he couldn't say any more than this. He was given, it says in verse 4, I was caught up to paradise and heard inexpressible things that no one is permitted to tell. He was not permitted to say it. That's why he hasn't said anything in 14 years. He wasn't permitted to say it. So with that, he's saying, I could boast about somebody like that, but I'm not going to boast about myself, because that glorifies me. My weaknesses glorify God. Somebody was about to say something. So let's talk about the heavens. Paul says he was brought up to paradise, or the third heaven. So if we think about the heavens, there are three that are, call it, documented. Now, depending on where you look, they might be 7, but 3 is in general what scholars have agreed to. So the first heaven is, call it the earth and the earth's atmosphere. It's the earth and all that it includes. Okay. The second heaven is the universe. It's where the celestial beings are, the stars, the sun, the moon, the planets. The third heaven is this spiritual realm where God and the angels dwell. So when he talks about that third heaven, he is saying paradise, one and the same. He is saying that he had the experience of being in the place, either in body or just in body or out of body experience. Remember, he said he didn't know. He had that experience of being in the place where God and the angels dwell. And
Christy, I'm sorry. Did you say what was the first one again?
the earth, first
Oh.
heaven is the earth. Yep. Second heaven is where the moon, stars, and all that reside. And then the heavens, the third heaven is where God lives. Okay. And so from a scripture standpoint, you can go and look. That is referenced. You see it on your screen. Deuteronomy 10:14. Genesis 28:12 and 1 Kings 8:27 all talk about multiple heavens.
This
Yeah.
is the second. I think the second heaven is the cosmos, isn't it?
Mhm.
And then that's where the angels in that realm are able to move a lot more up there, I believe. Am I? Yeah.
I'm gonna say
That's
I don't know.
their area.
Okay, that's their area. Well, what we know is with angels, we know that angels have the ability to navigate across dimensions, right? Because God sends angels. Angels came to earth. So we know that angels can go across all 3 heavens very easily. Okay. All right. So verse 6. Even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool, because I would be speaking the truth. but I refrain, so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say, or because of these surpassingly great revelations. Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. All right. You already know where my questions are going to be. What was the thorn that Paul had? What was the thorn?
That hasn't been revealed, has it?
Has not been revealed. Why do we think that was never revealed? Because people could obviously see he had a thorn.
Mhm.
People could see it. So why do we think that was not revealed? What type of thorn it was?
Maybe people
Would
would
it-
focus on that too much, constantly looking at what his issue is and getting off of God, off of the message.
Okay.
I would say too, I was thinking myself, that himself, he would focus too much on it
Mm,
and starts steering away from what God really had him doing, needing him to do.
mm-hmm. Any
Oh,
other
that's
perspectives?
about it.
No, that's good. Any other perspectives?
Yeah, that kept him in line, I believe, like we were saying. But
Mhm.
also, we don't exactly know, but I do know when I was reading back, Dr. Luke followed him. So whatever it was, hopefully Dr. Luke could take care of it. Okay, that was all.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
Okay.
Christy, can I say something, add something?
Yes, please.
So, okay, like you asking this question now about the thorn, and just like Jackie, whatever it said, we don't know what the thorn is, but we ourselves sometime when we ask God about removing the thorn, we already feel like we know what our thorn is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what, oh God, I'm losing my train of thought of what I was gonna ask about. That's all right, never mind.
Well,
It'll
when
come
it comes
to me.
back to you, because we're gonna be here for just
Okay,
it comes back.
Christy, I was gonna say that maybe because we as humans tend to latch on to something to make an excuse for. So maybe he didn't tell us what his was so that we wouldn't kind of use that as a crutch. Well, it hindered Paul. So what you expect of me? Of course I'm gonna fall to this because Paul, look who he was. And
Yeah.
so I mean, that's just another
Yeah,
thought.
yes. I believe it's a combination of what you all said and especially what you just said, Deborah, because had the thorn been revealed. So think about it, and to Deborah's point, as humans, what do we tend to do? We compare. We compare ourselves to other people. Oh, my situation is so much worse. Oh, my situation is so much better. Never are we satisfied with where we are. It doesn't matter what it is. And I'm a competitive person, so I'm always looking like, ugh, I probably could have won. Oh, that's just my nature. But as humans, we tend to compare ourselves, which is why self-esteem issues are an issue, why social media is such a big thing, because how many likes and how many followers and all these things. And if we knew what that thorn was, we would either say our situation is so much worse, so that gives us license to be all down in the dumps, and no wonder I haven't done this, because, well, Paul had that, but my situation is so much worse. I mean, yeah, he had a limp, but I'm missing a leg. I mean, whatever. So I think that's why the thorn is not revealed to us, so that we don't have that spirit of comparison. When was Paul afflicted with the thorn? When was he afflicted with the thorn? Whatever the thorn is. Are we stuck? When was Paul afflicted with the thorn?
I'm coming. Hold on.
This is not a complicated one. So I know Watsika and Yolanda, y'all used to be going 72 BC.
I was gonna say maybe something happened on the road to Damascus. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe
It was
or
during
maybe it was something that he already had and he didn't notice it until until the road to Damascus. Maybe before it wasn't a thorn.
It was
when he
during his
wasn't-
third heaven experience.
Yes, yes. When he had the experience, right after that. So within that 14 years ago-ish is when all of that happened, because he had this wonderful vision, but then he had this thorn, and the thorn had a purpose. Well, so let me, before we say that, so thank you, Yolanda, you saved the group. Who inflicted the thorn in his flesh? This is an easy one, come on. Who inflicted the thorn?
Satan.
Yes, and inflicted is not even the right word. Gave is what I should have said. Who gave him the thorn? And it was indeed Satan. It was indeed Satan. What was the purpose of the thorn? It really had two purposes. What was the purposes of the thorn?
The purpose, are you talking about the purpose of Paul, Satan giving him the, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, yes, that's a part of it. Yes. So yes, let's answer that one first.
Well, verse 7 says to
Get him off
to
track.
keep me from exalting myself.
So humility. So from God's perspective, humility. From Satan's perspective, what was the purpose?
Both. I don't know.
It's right there in your scripture. Let's look.
I would say it has something to do with trying to keep him from doing what God has called him to do. If Satan gave it to him, that means it, because Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So he's trying to destroy his ministry or keep him from doing what he was called to do.
Okay, somebody read verse 7 out loud for me, please. Who's got verse 7?
I have it. Because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, there was given a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep
There
me
it
from
is.
exalting myself.
To torment me. From Satan's perspective, it is to torment. From God's perspective, it is humility. So what this basically says is we have been given, sometimes we are given a thorn, and it is meant for one thing. It's meant for our pain. It's meant to throw us off track, but God has a way of using it for his good. And that humility, Paul often talks about, strength for weakness. That's the name of our study for today. But Paul talks about those weaknesses but he needed that humility for God to be able to use him. Now, that doesn't mean he was weak. We often talk about people get mixed up between somebody being humble and being weak. Two very, very different things. So the purpose of that thorn was to serve both. It was that constant reminder of Paul that he had to rely on God because he did not have the strength to do everything that God was calling him to do. Remember that list of things I listed off last week of all of Paul's accomplishments? He could not have done those things in his flesh. And so he needed that. The thorn was a physical reminder that he could not do what he needed to do for God, what God was calling him to do all by himself.
So that being said, that's the same thing with us, the Lord leaving the thorn with us to continue to have us before him, to draw us to him.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, so because think about it, when the next verse goes on to say that he pleaded 3 times, I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. So when we plead, what's the difference between asking and pleading? What's the difference between asking for something and pleading for something?
Pleading is like, it's so urgent.
Begging, or
You know, it's like, I have to have.
Mm-hmm. You have to have it. Okay. And when you ask,
It's more just a request,
mhm,
you know, you're not stressed out necessarily about it.
mhm.
Almost like a hope, like I hope I get whatever.
Which one, the pleading or the ask?
The
Virginia?
asking.
The
The
asking.
asking.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you ask, you're like, okay, yeah, can I have a glass of water? Well, you just assume if they have water, they'll give you a glass of water. Okay, great. If they don't, you're fine. I'm like, when I leave, I'll go buy a bottle of water. It's all good. But if you were in the desert and all you're seeing is oasis, and everybody knows an oasis is when you think you see something that's not really there, because when you get delirious, you start to see things that you really need or you want. And so if you were in the desert and you needed water, are you asking or are you pleading?
Pleading and begging.
Pleading.
You're
Yeah.
pleading. You're pleading.
Yes.
So he says 3 times I pleaded. Now, when we talk about prayer, because pleading in this case, he's pleading to God. So he is praying earnestly to God. And I've heard, and we've had these conversations in our Bible studies or Sunday school lessons where, how often do you pray? If you ask for something, some people say you ask one time, you leave it there. And, God heard you. You don't need to keep asking. You don't need to keep begging. You don't need to keep. But Paul clearly showed, he said, I asked 3 times. Asked 3 times. And if you look at Philippians 4:6, everybody go to Philippians 4:6 real quickly. It says, because this is Paul's writing, right? Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. So in his mind, he was doing what he was telling people to do. Hey, make your request known. Lord, I want this thorn to be removed. Now, chop, chop. I want this to be removed. And it didn't happen. So it kind of he's doing what he told us to do. And for people who say you don't need to keep asking God, you don't need to keep asking for things multiple times, even in Mark. So let's jump over to Mark 14, 39 through 41. Mark 14, 39 through 41. That's a long chapter. 39 through 41 says, once more, this was Jesus in the garden. He said, once more he went away and prayed the same thing. When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the 3rd time, he said, are you still stressing? Are you stressing? He said, are you still sleeping and resting? Enough, the hour has come. So the Lord, in that instance, he went back and he prayed 3 times. They said he came back for the 3rd time. He had gone and prayed 3 times for the cup to be removed from him. And was it? Yes or no? It was not. It was
No.
not, right? So sometimes we can plead for things, but God has a different will for us. And so that's not going to be the case. Now, I'm going to show you this clip because this is actually one of my favorite scenes of all time. But I think it is a great example of what pleading looks like. And to set the tone, who all has seen the show A Different World? Used to come on years and years ago. Dwayne, yes. And who's seen this before? You already know what I'm going to show you.
Yeah, I've seen it.
So Dwayne and Whitley were the item. And in this case, setting the scene, Whitley was about to marry someone else. Okay, but they had been courting all that time up until this, but Whitley is about to marry someone else. So let me show you this clip here. And let me know really quickly if you can't hear the sound. I think I have it turned on.
Go on, Reverend. Go on.
I can't until she responds.
Well, she means yes.
Well, she's got to say yes.
I will.
Will you? Blessed are those who ask the questions, brother.
Whitley, I love you, and if you'll have me, I want you to be my wife.
What the hell are you doing?
Hey, I'm sorry, Byron. I love her.
Die. Just die.
Will you have me, Dwayne, as your lawfully wedded husband from this day forth to having a whole and richer for poorer? Baby, please, please.
I do. Wait. You all heard it. You heard it. She said, and I do.
But to whom?
Well, I'm sorry, Byron. No.
Is anybody getting married here today?
Oh, hey, hold on. Right there, thank you, Mr. Gaines. Yes, we get married.
Without-
I'm Dwayne.
All right. It makes me smile. I don't care how many times I've seen that. That clip must be probably 30 years old at this point. But I love it. Now, in this case, his pleading actually helped, right? He got the girl. But that urgency that he felt in that moment, when we get to that place of pleading and truly needing something, that urgency, that was urgency. She was about to be married, right? But that urgency we feel, that's what I imagine Paul felt. That's what I imagine Jesus felt when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. So he said 3 times I pleaded, but in those cases, there was a different plan. There's a different plan. All right, so Paul goes on to say, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. We ask this every time we say the word grace, but what is grace? What
Something
is-
given that's undeserving.
Unmerited favor.
Unmerited favor. And then how do we define sufficient?
Enough.
Yeah, just enough.
Enough. So my favor is enough for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. And I said this earlier, the Corinthians were all about this display of strength and accolades and their possessions and their pedigree. So weakness was something that was definitely seen as weakness to the Corinthians. They clearly had problems accepting or embracing those who appeared weak, which is why Paul is spending all this time writing these letters. And he's like, you know what? All you all seem to respond to is boasting. So I'm going to boast, but I'm still not going to boast in the way that you want me to. I'm boasting in my weaknesses. And those weaknesses are what have made me powerful and made me able to do all the things that I listed off that Paul had accomplished last week. Those were all the things that he was able to do because he relished in his weakness. The fact that he had this thorn, whether that was part of what made him weak or not, that was a portion for sure. But the humility that came along with that, his willingness to rely on God is what allowed him to be able to reach all of those churches, to plant all of those churches, to get past all of the mobbings and all the things that he experienced, the hardships on the ship and all of those things. God's grace, his favor was enough for him, for his power is made perfect in the weakness. So there's a lot of other examples in the Bible of God's grace and weakness. Throw out a few of them. This is a Bible trivia time. What are some examples in the Bible where God shows his favor and that was enough her people. And you could say the whole Bible, but let's get specific. Give me some examples.
God showed favor with Joseph.
Okay, say more.
When he went to Potiphar, and then Potiphar didn't kill him, so that was faith right there. Then he went because of what about the wife, and then the next thing he went to the prison, and he was over the prisoners, okay, and then he went with the dreams, told the dreams for the Pharaoh, and then he went all the way up to the top, and that took I think about 20-something years, wasn't it?
Okay. Another example. Good one.
I would say Solomon.
Okay, say more.
You know, he was the wisest man. You know, he didn't ask for the wisdom, but God gave it to him.
Oh,
you know?
but did he ask for wisdom?
Yes, yeah. Well, he did. He did.
did.
But he favored him in the sense that he was able to do all of this through God. You know, it was his favor, because without him, he wouldn't have been able to become what he became. So that wisdom caused him to be able to do magnificent things.
Angela, I don't know if you're in the car or not, but I saw you said the parting of the Red Sea. I don't know if you want to come off mute and talk about that. Was that Angela that put that in there? I might have looked at it too quickly. Anybody else?
What about I'll get mixed up on it. What about the lady that was the prostitute? And she let she hid the man. Tell me what that story.
Rahab.
Okay, well, you know what I'm talking about. So I don't have to go through it because you already know the story.
Yeah. Tell a story. Tell a story.
I don't know it. So, I know of it, but I get twisted.
You know the story. You do
know what I'm talking about. Is that favor? Does that show him favor? To her, I think it was.
It is. I agree.
To me.
Yeah, because in that moment she's weak. So remember the background of that story is they came in to destroy the town. They were going to destroy the whole city. So you're spot on. They were there to destroy the whole city. And the fact that she protected them and then had the wisdom to put that sheet or whatever was out the window, right? They said, if you do this, I'll spare you. So absolutely.
So it spared her from being okay.
Yep. Excellent. Good one. Who's got another one?
I can piggyback off of that because later on, Ruth Boaz, and then later on, Jesus was that line. Jesus came out of that line.
Yeah.
Okay, because Boaz was the kinsman redeemer. So, so that's what happened back then.
Yeah. David and Goliath. That's another one. Gideon. So you remember when Gideon was going to war and he had 3,000 men and the guy was like, nope, 300. That's all you get to take. Which in our flesh is not enough, but it was sufficient because God had given him favor in that scenario. Good. All right. He goes on to say, I have made a fool of myself, but you drove me to it. So I'm just doing foolish things. I'm out here boasting, acting a fool, because that's what you all want to see. I ought to have been commended by you, for I am not in the least inferior to the super apostles, even though I am nothing. So he continues to make himself low. Look, I'm nobody. I'm just a follower of Christ. I am just out here trying to do what Jesus has commanded for me to do. And you all ought to be commending me for that, but you're not. You'd rather compare me to these inferior super apostles that you so like to listen to. He says, verse 12, I persevered in demonstrating among you the marks of a true apostle, including signs, wonders, and miracles. I've done everything I can to show you that I am not inferior to these people. How were you inferior to the other churches, except that I was never a burden to you? Forgive me this wrong. Remember, a part of this is the Corinthians thought that he should, in essence, he should be asking them for money. And Ornita, you made such a great point last week or the week before that. And I don't know if you can remember it, to talk about the Macedonians versus the Corinthians. And so that was your cushion time, so be prepared in just a second. But Paul was basically, the fact that he didn't ask them for money, they saw that as inferior, because in their mind, these super apostles who were in town and preaching and teaching to them were always asking for money. So it's just like in the speaking world. If you're speaking for free, you're not considered a professional speaker. You're not seen as the one we want to put on the big screen because you're doing it for free. You're not a professional until you are paid to do it. So he's saying, hey, I never was even a burden to you. But even that, they seem to be holding against him. Ornita, was that enough cushion time for you?
I forgot what your question, you had asked the question.
I
at the
did, and now I
end.
can't remember my question.
And when I thought about it, I think I was saying that Paul was over exaggerating a sentence.
Oh, the robbing.
Yes.
That was my question to Porter, was he said, have I robbed you?
And I said that I felt that Paul was over exaggerating because the Macedonians didn't have much, whereas the Corinthians had so much, and they knew that the Macedonians didn't have anything. And that's why I felt like he was over exaggerating using that word.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right. Verses 14 through 18. Now I'm ready to visit you for the third time, and I will not be a burden to you. So I'm still not going to ask you for money, because what I want is not your possessions, but you. After all, children should not have to save up for their parents, but parents for their children. So he's saying, you are my spiritual children. It is my job to take care of you. So I will very gladly spend for you everything I have and expend myself as well. If I love you more, will you love me less? Be that as it may, I have not been a burden to you. Yet, crafty fellow that I am, I caught you by trickery. So he's like, really, I've done nothing here. He's just continuing with the sarcasm. 17, did I exploit you through any of the men I sent to you? I urged Titus to go to you, and I sent our brother with him. Titus did not exploit you, did he? Did he not walk in the same footsteps by the same Spirit? Who is Titus? Who remembers who Titus is?
But Titus, the one that Paul has sent ahead. Oh God, maybe I'm getting him mixed up.
Nope, you're right. Keep going.
To send, he was the one that had, oh God, Christy, I'm getting it.
You're so right, though.
That's okay.
Help her out. Who? Finish that up.
I know what I'm talking about.
Yep, you do.
He
Who was
the one-
Titus?
Yeah. He already knew about Jesus. He knew about.
Mhm.
That's all right. Let me offer here.
Okay. Anybody else? Who was
Somebody
Titus?
else.
He was
I
a
think he
Gentile.
was being considered as a companion of Paul, in ministry. He was and he was a servant of God also.
Okay. Deacon?
He was a Gentile, okay?
Mhm.
So as he went, he just, and the basic thing I know, he helped Paul out. That's all I know right there.
Yeah. So Titus spent a lot of time in Corinth. He was involved with the church there. He was also, to your point, Jacqueline, he was really actively involved in Paul's ministry. He was the one who carried the fundraising letter to the Church of Corinth. And so he was also the one who was sent to restore order to the house churches. And anytime that there was corruption, he would be there to replace those corrupt leaders with godly leaders. So he had a very, very important role. Now, he also mentions in verse 18, and I sent our brother with him. Who was the brother he's talking about?
I'm guessing, was it Timothy?
Not Timothy.
Who was the brother?
Good guess.
that
Who was our
Titus-
brother? I'll give you a hint. He was an excellent orator.
But Apollos?
Yep.
Was it him? Oh.
You're on it today. Yes, Apollos. Yes, it is thought that it is Apollos. And recall, Apollos was out speaking about Jesus, but he didn't really know the full message of the gospel. And so who helped him to learn? Two people who helped Apollos really learn the
That
message.
was Priscilla and Aquila.
You got it. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so let's wrap. Have you been thinking all along that we have been defending ourselves to you? We have been speaking in the sight of God as those in Christ. And everything we do, dear friends, is for your strengthening. For I am afraid that when I come, I may not find you as I want you to be, and you may not find me as you want me to be. I fear there may be discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, slander, gossip, arrogance, and disorder. I'm afraid that when I come again, my God will humble me before you, and I will be grieved over many who have sinned earlier and have not repented of the impurity, sexual sin, and debauchery in which they have indulged. So Paul is basically ending chapter 12 here by saying, hey, everything I am doing to build you all up. All the letters, all the chastising I've had to do, the correcting I've had to do, it's all been in love and to ensure that you all are strong, or that they were strong in the word of God, and that they were good Christians, in essence, that they were good Christians. Now in verse 20, he talks about, I'm afraid that when I come, I may not find you as I want you to be. He's been sending all these letters up to this point, and he's been giving them instruction. He's sending them people. He's sending them leaders to help them become, good followers of Christ. And he's afraid that when he comes on this third time, because the first two times, like, we still got problems. I don't want to come a third time and this still be an issue. I don't want to find you the way I don't want to see you. And if I do, you're probably going to see a side of me that you don't want to see. That's what he's saying in verse 20. Verse 21, he says, I'm afraid that when I come again, my God will humble me before you. So in essence, this is saying that if you aren't doing the things I think you should be doing, and I show up a different way, God humbling me before you is basically, in my mind, I'm going to be thinking that I'm not really good at this. I'm going to be thinking I must not be a good leader if I can't convince the Corinthians or influence them to do the right thing. So that's verse 12 in a nutshell. Let me pause for any questions before I say we're going to do chapter 13 next week. Any questions? Any questions? All right. With that said, we can stop the recording. Any prayer requests that we have? Any prayer requests?
Yes, please, keep my family in prayer. I lost my brother-in-law.
Okay.